Childhood memories come and go, fading into silhouettes from past lives. But among the phantom images are a handful that remain. While they've lost some of their sharpness, their impact can still be felt, and one such memory for me is of a picture. Close your eyes. Actually maybe don't. This is a video, so instead, close your mind's eye. Close your mind's eye. Get it? Okay. And imagine a forest with large trees. See how the roots grow wild, like waves they protrude above the swampy waters. An image more akin to fantasy. Or Dagobah for that matter. Yes. But you know it's real. Where was this picture taken? You look down at the footnote, but it's just a blur. You can't make it out. You look up in frustration, back at the picture, and then you realize, was it in color? Or was it black and white? But these minute details aren't what really matter. Instead, let's focus on what was left out of the frame. A portrait is bound by its dimensions, and if what's inside of those bounds is intriguing enough, then this limitation can be both a source of frustration and inspiration. And for me, this is a window to another world. It stoked the fire, it lit the imagination, it begged the question. What lies beyond the frame? I guess I should clarify though how this ties into the Miyazaki or Ghibli films to be exact. But first, if you're not familiar with Miyazaki, then let me explain. He's a manga artist, a screenwriter, a director, and co-creator of Studio Ghibli, the equivalent to Disney in Japan. To put it rather simply, search either Miyazaki or Ghibli on YouTube and you'll find countless videos celebrating their quality, and even more, breaking down what makes them classics. Kinda like the one you're watching right now. Don't forget to like and subscribe. So what can I bring to this conversation? Well, as I alluded to earlier, I believe the power behind Miyazaki's works lies in the way they allowed the viewer to fill in the gaps, incentivizing the use of your imagination. Yeah, yours. And it creates a stronger bond between you and the story.
Doesn't sound too bad. I'll try and stay awake.
So, how does he accomplish this?
Chapter 1.
First and foremost, Miyazaki will usually leave room for pauses. Sorta like this. But here, just to prove the point, let me just... Why don't we look at this scene from Spirited Away as an example? We join Chihiro as she rides a train through a watery landscape, and at face value, nothing really happens. We are simply whisked away from station to station through a surreal landscape dotted by tiny islands. No words are said. No signs of acknowledgements are made. We just see her contemplate. And if done right, i.e. through animation and musical score, then the viewer will find themselves reflecting as well. Who lives out here? Who are the other passengers? What lies beyond? Etc., etc. And then it ends. We get off the train and continue our journey. So without any exposition, if we are to construct any interpretations, we're gonna have to look here. And you'll quickly find that your own experiences and beliefs will begin to draw a picture that fills in the gaps. And all this from just a pause. And there are other scenes like this sprinkled throughout Miyazaki's films. But let's be brief and take this jaunt on to the next scene. Right, so another way to get us to fill in these gaps is by providing just enough information and not a smidget more. We can see this employed in Howl's Moving Castle, with its story set against the backdrop of a war. Which war? Who cares? War. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. And the details are less vague to provide us the room to feed it our own interpretations. And perhaps my favorite example of this is from or Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. In the beginning, we are given a short write-up explaining the collapse of industrial civilization over 1,000 years ago, and the dangers the Sea of Decay poses on the survival of humanity. That's not good. And then we get this beautiful sequence of the history of this world presented to you via this tapestry. Sort of like this. And toss in a couple scenes of the giant god warriors, and bingo bongo, you have yourselves one hell of an intro. Shh. Sorry. Oh, but there's more, as the very piece of music that plays throughout this segment is often referred as the Legend of the Wind. Heck, the entire movie's soundtrack is called a symphonic poem, so if you're starting to get legend vibes, then you're right in the money. This story is being presented to us as a legend, and legends are tailor-made for interpretations, for variations, and for asking yourself, you guessed it, what lies beyond the frame? A book about Miyazaki. How fortuitous. I wonder what's in here. This here is Starting Point, a book that chronicles the career of Hayao Miyazaki between 1979 and 1996. And throughout the collection of interviews and articles, Miyazaki will often refer to continuity sketches when explaining his process for creating stories. But I tell you what, I'll let Miyazaki explain by reading a transcript of a speech he gave on August 6, 1994, for the Association of Scenario Writers, Japan. He elaborates. For us, the continuity sketches are the screenplay, he continues. You have drawings in frames, and next to each frame, a description of the content of the frame, with stage directions on the left side and dialogue on the right. You can get a pretty good idea of what's going on, so it's what the animators use to base their drawings on, he later adds. We find ourselves in this ridiculous situation of trying to simultaneously create the story, the scenario, and the continuity sketches, and then, once the film is finished, we actually do have a story and a screenplay. This workflow stems from Miyazaki's creative process, philosophy, or whatever you want to call it. As he wrote in May of 1979's edition of Gekkan Ihon Bezatsu Animation, from within the confusion of your mind, you start to capture the hazy figure of what you want to express. And then you start to draw. It doesn't matter if the story isn't yet complete. The story will follow. Later still, the characters will shape. You draw a picture that establishes the underlying tone for a specific world. So what does this all mean? Well, because the setting is created before the scenario, we end up with a world that's lush with details, one upon which characters and their motivations can organically stem from. At least, that's a harmonious way to view it, as I'm sure like all creative ventures, it's full of its own agonizing pitfalls. But essentially, if done right, you're able to create a believable world, one that a viewer will buy into. And this is key, because you can grab our undivided attention, then we begin to organically ask the questions. We begin to fill in the gaps. So let me reiterate, there are many factors that make a good film, but in case of Miyazaki's works, I find it's the way that they spark my imagination that has me always coming back, whether they be new entries or old favorites. So the next time you watch one of his films, whether for the first or the 100th time, remember to ask yourself, what lies beyond the frame?